Calyrex Shadow Rider.
Even too in a format where so many things are meticulously planned out, that friend guard, that little bit of little help for your partner Pokemon can really mess things up. So I'm excited to get into this and get a little bit of glimpse into what these players are thinking. Right away, it's going to be one restricted. Lunala's making an appearance next to this Incineroar. Of course, a little bit of Intimidate onto the Urshifu on the opposing end. And it's going to be Urshifu, the Pokemon of the weekend, next to this Mienshao. So what can Nicholas go for on this turn?
Nicholas has the faster Fake Out, can stop Incineroar Fake Out and buy the Urshifu a free chance to attack, right? Incineroar very vulnerable to Surging Strikes, would give some recoil back over to Rocky Helmet, and also, like we mentioned, the Terastallization can be so important for these restricted Pokemon that it's a lot harder to choose to Terastallize Incineroar out of it. That may force an Incineroar switch. We see on the screen that Rillaboom is there, so a great switch option to have. But to some extent, Nicholas has the pace advantage at this moment. We talked about that decision of whether to try to set up your own Pokemon or disrupt your opponent. Right now, Nicholas does not have Calyrex on board, isn't trying to set up nasty pots, but is trying to disrupt Lunala that's on the other side.
And a little bit of a switcheroo. You had talked about the faster fake out. Rillaboom going to be switching in, so you don't have to worry about a fake out into that potential slot. But right away, Terastallization spent into this match. And not going to be for this Calyrex Shadow Rider for Nicholas. Instead, you're talking about a Pokemon that you want to get some power from, Urshifu, Terra Water. So I feel like we know what's going to be on the horizon there. Fake out into the Rillaboom is only going to be good for a little bit of chip here. And it's not just offensive, but a great way to get out of that fairy type weakness. So you take this hit quite well, and you can retaliate back with this Surging Strikes. Of course, this isn't the most amount of damage, but it is going to really, really open up this Lunala. And now, if you're talking about a Lunala that maybe wanted to kind of maybe set up at some point, that option seems kind of completely eliminated.
Never cut out the Grassy Terrain and the leftovers. Of course, on the next turn, the Urshifu is going to be on the back foot, both because of Fake Out and Grassy Glide coming in. I think we learned something important about the speeds there. Lunala, a Pokemon that can play in so many different ways. We've seen it do well with Chircremani, but this one actually faster than the Urshifu on the other side. So it can also help threaten down the Urshifu and protect it itself. The Mienshao only has close combat as offense, so it can't go after the Lunala at the moment. So there's a little bit of protection there just from being able to prevent Surging Strikes and keep Lunala safe. Really critical that Nicholas has chosen to spin the Terra on Urshifu. It puts so much extra pressure on Lunala if you can manage to get a second Surging Strikes that would just be the KO on Lunala, but it is a little bit risky because you will then rely on the teammates and protect to make sure Calyrex is safe, because it will never be able to take a Moongeist beam from Lunala.
Something about this Urshifu as well is this isn't going to be the Choice Scarf. So there is the option of Detect if you are worried about the Rillaboom on the opposing end. And Mienshao, not really necessarily needed in this board state, will bring out Clefairy. So you do have redirection on this next go around. Detect, Urshifu, Grassy Glide, going to do nothing. So making sure that this Pokemon that you've spent this Terastallization on is going to be safe. But now your partner Pokemon, this can in fact get hit. But Clefairy, still, when you were looking at this Evilite Pokemon, it's going to take the hit really, really well. And we're looking at that recovery that you pointed out last turn. Lunala is just slowly looking better and better.
Looking better and better, but looking like it's in a worse board position. The Clefairy is really the perfect thing to be able to switch in there, because now that Grassy Glide threat can just be redirected into Clefairy. That faster Moongeist Beam or Moonblast can also just be redirected into Clefairy, opening up that opportunity for Urshifu to get out another Surging Strikes. That puts Zachary on the back foot. Lunala could be forced to switch because you can't protect into those Surging Strikes, and you can't assure the Surging Strikes isn't coming on the next turn. But you already have Rillaboom sitting on the field next to Lunala, so you don't have a great Surging Strikes switch in, especially when that Terastallization has been invested to up the damage of the Surging Strikes.
So with all of that, Lunala will switch in on the field. Incineroar, not necessarily appreciate a hit, but at the same time, when we are looking at Incineroar with Rocky Helmet, that is damage that the Urshifu would be doing at itself. Clefairy, we talked about that redirection, so of course it's going to become the center of attention. Make sure anything from this Rillaboom stays away from the Urshifu. But this is going to be some damage back, and not only two, this is going to be close on whether it's going to be a 2-hit or a 3-hit on it. Okay, we will get the 2-hit, so only 2 ticks of this Rocky Helmet damage, but you're still getting pretty low on health. But as long as the Clefairy's around, well, nothing can really hit you at this point. Though Rillaboom, you are going for this bulkier attack with this Wood Hammer. Try to see if you can get rid of this Clefairy. So that redirection's now gone. It's just the one and done.
Really important that Clefairy was caught with the Moongeist Beam on the switch in. if that had been a calm mind trying to just take advantage of a bad position from Nicholas to get a boost, Lunala would have still been forced out and Woodhammer would not have been a KO into Clefairy. But by chipping Clefairy on the way in, that Woodhammer can get the KO, and that's a trade you're willing to take. Incineroar, something had to give in the spot where Lunala was. There was no easy way to get out of that position. So Incineroar, an easy thing to give over. It makes sure that some chip damage lands onto Urshifu, and now without Friend Guard, without Follow Me, Urshifu once again vulnerable to Grassy Glide. But at the same time, Nicholas, by navigating through the Clefairy, has reset Fake Out, and so can use that to yet again buy a turn for Urshifu to go out on the offense. I think Zachary has to be considering whether Lunala can do the damage itself to KO Urshifu. If it can, then you can accept a Fake Out and go out on the offense, but maybe thinks it doesn't, instead goes into Screamtail, leaves the Lunala in the back.
And of course, you talked about the importance of that Fake Out, being able to stop this Rillaboom and keep that Urshifu safe for just one turn longer. So it's going to hit the field. Screamtail, I mean, you always get to see the booster energy with that speed to make sure that it can be so offensive. But now, keeping the Lunala in the back, Screamtail has to be the one to move on forward with this.
Screamtail is going to have to provide some disruption, kind of open up some space for Zachary. The risk now with, you want to use the Fake Out, you just get Mienshao on the field. You may want to protect Urshifu from Grassy Glide, but those are difficult things to do with a Screamtail out on the other side. And so Urshifu might be able to get an attack off this turn, but there might be a high cost for it in terms of positioning because of what you get Encored into. So Nicholas has to be kind of considering whether it's worth going for a Surging Strikes this turn or just trying to reset the position. But it is a Fake Out into Rillaboom, no switch, so should be a Surging Strikes coming out.
At least the Urshifu is safe for this turn, but Mienshao is going to be forced to switch on the next, now being locked into this Encore, which of course you can only use on the first turn in battle, so that's going to be nothing next turn around. Surging Strikes into the Rillaboom, but Rillaboom's going to be resisting this hit. Of course, it's going to be the 3 hits. You do have the Mystic Water and the Terastallization, but that's still nowhere near enough damage, but could pave the way to be getting this out on the next turn.
It's an interesting decision that the Surging Strikes went into Rillaboom. I think that makes this next position a little bit more difficult because the Urshifu has been pressured with Grassy Glide. The Mienshao already Encored into Fake Out, needs to switch. But with one KO already taken, only one of these Pokemon can switch. And if you detect to protect the Urshifu, it might just get stuck into the Encore Blender. So this is the kind of, suddenly it's hard to ever find your footing again position that Zachary needed to open up space. Well, there's still one unrevealed Pokemon on Nicholas' side. We expect it is the Calyrex, which is going to threaten a ton of damage when it gets a chance to come back in. And now we're going to see what that last Pokemon is as Mienshao switches out while Encored into Fake Out. It is the Calyrex. Both restricted Pokemon brought, so we'll have to see what Calyrex can do to close the game.
And how this turn is going to be playing out, especially too when we are looking at big moves to hit into the opposing end. It's going to be, though, no priority and just a little bit of Dazzling Gleam first. So another opportunity for the Surging Strikes to then take care of this Rillaboom.
Yeah, I mean, a big decision there to not go for Grassy Glide into Urshifu was maybe looking for a Woodhammer into the slot next to it. But it means that the Urshifu gets the free Surging Strikes and KO into Rillaboom.
Yeah, so now this is an Urshifu that is stuck around. That was the last turn of Grassy Terrain, and Zachary now left with 2 Pokemon left, and now restricted a piece for both of these players on the field.
Restricted a piece, but really so much advantage from the speed for Nicholas that the Astral Barrage is going to come first. The Screamtail can't do anything to disrupt the Calyrex at the moment. You can't afford to take an Astral Barrage. Now, the last key piece that gives Zachary a chance in this is the Terastallization isn't spent, but I think there's really compelling arguments to spend it either way. You could try to protect the Lunala and save Screamtail through the end of the turn so that it could disable the Calyrex on the next turn if you think Astral Barrage is coming, or you could try to use the Terastallization to keep Lunala safe through an Astral Barrage. You're only going to get to do one or the other, and then probably the other Pokemon is extremely vulnerable to Astral Barrage.
Yeah, and even at this point, if you're trying to make sure one Pokemon is safe past an Astral Barrage, well, then you can be heavily threatened by the other. But the Urshifu is going to put a little bit of that pressure for this time and bring the Mienshao in its place instead. As finally, in the later moments of this match, we're finally going to see Terastallization coming out from Zachary. And that one, of course, in the Lunala, drop that Ghost typing.
No more weakness to Astral Barrage. We have the Fairy, Lunala, and a little bit of safety for it. The Screamtail left hanging with a disable into a switching slot, just going to fail.
It's a great decision there, knowing that there is the possibility of the Screamtail locking you down. So all of a sudden, Screamtail's accomplished nothing, and Calyrex has accomplished everything. That Life Orb boosted damage doing so much work. Doesn't pick up the KOs, though. And now this Lunala, with that Terastallization, will be able to retaliate, and that is going to be a Calyrex that is swiftly dealt with.
That's the cost of the water terastallization on Urshifu earlier on, that you had no way to protect the Calyrex there. But it seemed like it's a trade that was worth it, with both of these Pokemon now so low, and also the terastallization spent on Lunala, meaning it's vulnerable to fake out, vulnerable to close combat. Mienshao is more significantly able to help the damage here. This Urshifu has Aqua Jet, so it can just Aqua Jet into Screamtail while Mienshao goes for close combat into Lunala. Even resisted, you have to imagine that that's enough damage to get the job done.
Yeah, even like, just go for the fake out. Lunala won't faint this go, but Aqua Jet will be able to take care at least of any of these Pokemon. Both of them are on a sliver of health. So even if the Calyrex wasn't enough to get either of those KOs last turn, of course, putting Nicholas into a winning position for this one. Lunala does nothing, watches its partner Pokemon faint, and this next turn will be the easy cleanup for Nicholas to be up 1 in the set.
Really the pivotal moment of this game. It was a game that was played so close, with really crucial damage trades being made either way. And then there was the moment where Nicholas took the huge risk, attacked with Urshifu while the Rillaboom was on the other side of the field and was not punished for it, and ends up taking this game in return.
Yeah, maybe anticipating, because you had talked about the fact that both of those Pokemon could maybe want to switch on that turn, and is which one that you kind of want to go for. Maybe anticipating that Urshifu would switch out, and then you're not all of a sudden punished, and then trying to go for the Woodhammer damage, but unfortunately just not pinning that slot means that Urshifu can just run rampant in this match.
Yeah, and probably anticipating in the same way I was, that the two best options are switch the Urshifu and leave the Mienshao hanging, or to protect the Urshifu and switch the Mienshao. And that, switch the Mienshao and just go ahead and attack with the Urshifu was a distant third option. But then the way it played out, with Rillaboom trying to take advantage of that, kind of not honestly like protecting against the risk the Urshifu would just attack, meant that when Rillaboom went down to a Surging Strikes, nothing was gained out of the back for it. Nicholas had everything he needed to pretty easily close this game with Calyrex coming in.
And that was even good on the turn before, because not the most times when you see how much Surging Strikes can do into the opposing slot that maybe you're still going to target it into the Rillaboom where it is resisted. But deciding to just kind of target down this slot, knowing, yeah, of course I'm not going to get the most momentum this turn, but setting yourself for that play next turn to where there's always going to be that constant threat, which Nicholas was able to capitalize off of so well. It was really, really well done. That was a really great set through and through, though. But now I'm kind of wondering where we go into this game, too, especially for Zachary. We didn't necessarily see any setup from either of these players because there were so many other little offensive tools that we use. So knowing that now, do you still leave your restricted for Zachary?
Well, I think the reason we saw no setup is that Nicholas opted out of it, right? Calyrex was the last Pokemon to hit the field. You're not really often going to boost up the last Pokemon that hits the field. Its job is to more close the game, which is something Calyrex is great at. With its speed and Life Orb, it can just go out on the offense. And there was no boost from the Lunala because it was immediately pressured. And it was pressured because Nicholas didn't opt to lead the Calyrex and play with his own boost. He opted to lead the Urshifu and go for Fake Out and Surging Strikes and start just trying to pressure the game. That script can flip all around. Zachary also has the tools to go out a little bit more aggressively, though not as strong of a tool as Urshifu. It probably would be things like the Ogre Pawn and Rillaboom trying to pressure out some damage, maybe forcing him into a game plan of using Lunala, because those tools just don't feel as strong. And from Nicholas' side, maybe it felt great to just be out there attacking with Urshifu consistently, and if you think you can repeat it. But it always has to be in the back of your mind that that only worked because that Grassy Glide didn't come in that turn, and you're not sure you want to just repeat that recipe. And so yeah, it is a shift up. Both restricteds now on the field. Mienshao next to the Calyrex Shadow Rider, Lunala and Incineroar on the other side.
Nice little switch up, and then now it's not going to be a Calyrex Shadow Rider to try and get through that end game. Instead, you have to imagine that it's the Urshifu that's looking to be on the cleanup crew this time around. And both big supportive options. Again, it's into that Mienshao and, of course, get that faster fake out into this Incineroar. And, of course, when you're looking at two restricteds that really pressure each other, you'd have to imagine that the Terastallization this time around for Nicholas has to be spent on Calyrex.
Yeah, with it hitting the field this early, I expect the Terastallization will be spent there and spent there quickly if Calyrex isn't just protecting itself. There's also interesting mind games here where if you really think the Lunala has to Terastallize on this turn, you can also put your Fake Out into that slot, and then you don't have to spend Terastallization if you're right about it. So a few risky games there on turn one that kind of stabilize after we see where the Terastallizations are spent.
And with the speed tier and the fact that we're seeing this Lunala go first, it makes me imagine that maybe we aren't seeing it from the Calyrex. Of course, there is also the option of Protect if you want to maybe be... Yeah. No, we're just good. Okay, we're going to get sassy with it. It's going to be Fake Out. Lunala is stopped. Terastallization. That would be a Fake Out that couldn't do anything if the Lunala had stayed in its original typing, but now Lunala can't do anything. Calyrex doesn't Terastallize, so you can't fall victim to the same thing, and you do get up the nasty plot. Parting Shot does ensure that you are brought down to just a 1 special attack, but now this is a Calyrex with 1 boost underneath it, and now you've already gotten the Terastallization out of Zachary. You can use that information going forward, but Screamtail hitting the field, that can also be dangerous when you're looking at the implications here for Nicholas.
Yeah, Screamtail comes in and threatens Encore after the nasty plot, like we saw before the game. But I mean, Nicholas is just playing this match with no fear. Just does not Terastallize the Calyrex in front of 2 Pokemon that both have 4 times super effective moves that could have just one-hit KO'd Calyrex. Instead, just nasty plots in front of them. Doesn't even kind of force that you must Terastallize and get faked out, otherwise my Astral Barrage will just KO you, because no, it's just nasty plot. That could have just been Moongeist Beam from an unterastallized Lunala coming out this game. And Nicholas saying, you're more afraid of the Calyrex than I am afraid in this moment, and I can make that play and just get the boost. It's only a +1 boost because the Parting Shot comes out, and mitigated even further by Screamtail coming in and breaking up some momentum. But Nicholas has the tools to kind of play out of that. You can protect the Calyrex and pivot out to another Fake Out to pressure Screamtail or Follow Me in order to redirect an Encore. So the Calyrex isn't going to immediately lose that boost just because Screamtail comes in, because yeah, Clefairy can just come into that slot. But Zachary also has to know that this threat is coming and can also put a bunch of damage in that slot, knowing Protect must come there.
And now that Nicholas, you know that Nicholas is willing to make those big moves, there's always like, okay, you gotta keep it honest. We got to see it at the first match. We got to see it now. So you have to make sure that, yeah, this Calyrex, you Encore, try and slow that down. But when you know the Calyrex is protecting and the other slot has to pivot, that is a chance for Lunala to start getting boosted up. And notably, a big difference with these setup Pokemon as well is for the Lunala, you do get the special defense. And with the leftovers, you now have Shadow Shield still intact.
Exactly. Really important that Lunala now looks so bulky with +1 special defense, Shadow Shield back intact, and that's what the 1 turn of kind of Encore pressure forces out with the passive turn to Protect and Switch for Calyrex. So now both have a little bit of boost, but it once again seems like Lunala's in a strong position. Screamtail can just protect itself from that +1 Astral Barrage that it wouldn't survive, and the turn can go on.
It's going to be the Follow Me, Protect from Screamtail. So yeah, Clefairy, center of attention. And with that center of attention, the Calyrex, oh, we're going for all of the boost. That is going to be a second nasty plot. So now we're at the +3, since you do have to account for that Parting Shot. But it's not just going to be Nicholas that's setting up. Lunala's setting up even more. And again, special defense. That is going to be key going on into this. And if on the other end, things are setting up, Screamtail, you can try and start to lock down the Clefairy to then shut down Calyrex.
From both players, I think really important to get boosts there. The Calyrex doesn't want to just attack into Lunala that it can't KO on a turn where Screamtail is protecting itself. And Lunala, meanwhile, we saw the damage into Clefairy in game 1. Just +1 wouldn't have been enough to pick up the KO, and so getting the boost so that you take less damage in the future, and can, when you spin your single targeting attack into a Follow Me, get the KO on Clefairy is pretty important. But now the damage starts to boost up. Calyrex at +3 can Astral Barrage into the Screamtail, pick up a boost to get into +4, and Clefairy will make sure that that's very safe, because it's just going to be Screamtail. Whatever it wants to do has to go into Clefairy. Whatever Lunala wants to do has to go into Clefairy.
So now this Clefairy that, you know, has been following me, it is going to be disabled, so it can't go for that on the next turn. It's whether you already got yourself in a position where you can take full advantage. Lunala, thanks to the special defense and the Shadow Shield, is going to be taking the hit quite well, especially too with the Terastallization. But Calyrex now, with that Grimnay, is up to that +4. At least on this next turn, you do get a crack at that Calyrex if you choose so. And this Lunala, like this, yeah, this special defense is getting a little out of control.
Zachary really has to keep going for the boost to try to make sure that the Astral Barrage is not going to be doing too much damage, because at this point, because you have to spend a turn just KOing Clefairy and not doing any damage into Calyrex, and you know that the turn that you do that, that you take the KO into Clefairy, it's just going to be, you know, Mianxiao coming in to apply fake out pressure, or Urshifu coming in to threaten a surging strikes if you go for a single targeting attack into Calyrex. So you really have to be kind of set up for everything you want at the time that you break this. But important now, Clefairy did have Follow Me disabled, so isn't providing that same support this turn that may force a switch out of Nicholas on this turn. You know, you can still just protect Calyrex and switch the Clefairy slot to get back into a more safe position, but for right now, Calyrex has no helpful partner for it. Friend Guard is not going to do enough against a +3 Moonguy speed, most likely.
There's also the opportunity, if you are just anticipating the Calyrex to protect and a switch, to try and really pressure that secondary slot, to try and shut that down, to even just KO something on that switch in instead. But it's going to be a Rillaboom that swaps out, and an Incineroar that's here for the next turn. And it's not just all going to be about Follow Me. The Clefairy with this Helping Hand. Calyrex is at a +4. It's going to have this additional boost from the Helping Hand, and it's all-out offense, and neither of these Pokemon can stand up to that power.
Yeah, the Helping Hand, the extra 1.5 multiplier on top of those +4 boosts is just enough damage. And so it doesn't matter what defensive options are gone for Nicholas. He doesn't need to play any more defense, just straight out onto the offense. Astral Barrage that doesn't just KO the Lunala, but KOs that Incineroar from full health, picks up 2 more boosts, and just kind of cleanly has enough damage to close out this game. This all goes back to that really bold turn 1 and consistent, you know, lack of fear that Nicholas was showing to be able to set up and get into this position where he had all of the boosts he needed to close out the match.
And final turn, but essentially concession here as Rillaboom does nothing. And for this Calyrex Shadow Rider, it's going to claim the final KO in the match in a 2-0 fashion. Nicholas Morales gets to live to see another fight here in the top cut in Atlanta.
Just so well played to navigate the 2 different game plans. The first one of using the Terrestrialization on Urshifu to pressure so much damage with Surging Strikes, to find the one well-timed Astral Barrage that gave really good value. Didn't get any